affordable rent. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight, Cabinet is being asked to agree to, firstly, the purchase of 32 new affordable homes using the additional capital budget approved by Council at its meeting on the 12th of October 2023, and secondly, the letting of these homes in accordance with the Council's allocations policy at an affordable rent as set out in the Council's tenancy strategy. In July 2023, Council approved an accelerated affordable housing development programme of at least 400 new homes constructed or acquired by 2027. The underlying requirements behind the strategy were simple. Affordable units were being lost due to lack of uptake from housing associations, and we needed to ensure that no further units were lost and that affordable housing produced was kept for the benefit of residents. Officers are already working with BDW on a number of sites, and they contacted us regarding Phase 3 at Spitfire Green, New Hayne Road. Although they had made inquiries with other registered providers, no offers for the units had been received, and they are also keen to maintain continuity throughout the sites by working with us. These homes are anticipated to be EPC-B, and construction will start early next year. The capital cost for these 32 Section 106 affordable rent units at Phase 3 of Spitfire Green, New Hayne Road, Ramsgate is £4,050,000 and £212,000 for associated costs. As has been discussed previously, we have a strong assessment model in relation to these purchases. If affordability and return does not add up within our viability model, we do not move forward with the purchase. Each proposal is assessed separately against these guidelines by Finance. For this acquisition, paragraph 3.4 shows that the proposed purchase would generate a cash flow deficit in year 1 of £43,813, with a break-even point in year 16, with surpluses accumulating between year 16 and year 50. The project shows a surplus over a 30 to 50 year period. We are being exceptionally proactive in our approach to what has been described as the market failure across the South East. Councils and developers from Kent, Essex and East Sussex have been discussing the difficulty in sourcing registered providers to take the affordable housing set aside in Section 106 allocations. Thanet is a leading council in our determination to address this need and step in. This is having multiple positive impacts, as it is ensuring that affordable homes are not lost to the open market, providing homes that can be not only let to those on the housing register, but directly let through local lettings plans to those in temporary accommodation, and actually help with the completion of genuinely affordable housing. However, the changes to the multiple dwellings relief for stamp duty land tax that were announced in spring 2024 budget have provided a further obstacle to our due diligence and viability tests to buy larger numbers of homes. The Council has written to the Chancellor of the Exchequer to raise with them the concern that we have. We are aware that the rationale for bringing the measure was to prevent perceived abuse of the rules and speculative claims for relief, but increasing the amount of SDLT we pay on larger acquisitions has the significant potential to adversely hamper our attempts to deliver the positive outcomes listed above, and directly harms all councils' ability to provide affordable housing and exercise creativity in solving the issues created by current national affordable housing delivery system. As these homes have been designated as affordable homes in the Planning Consent and Section 106 agreement, they have been designed specifically for that purpose, and accordingly are considered appropriate for the HRA, in line with the need of households on the Council's register or those living in temporary accommodation. There is a significant level of need for one-bedroom homes, as well as for larger family homes. The unit sizes and mix of dwellings are as follows: 18 one-bed units and 14 two-bed units. It is proposed that the new homes are let in accordance with the Council's adopted allocations policy, and we will implement a local lettings plan to enable us to house not only those on the housing register, but also those in temporary accommodation. I move the recommendations set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Yates. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm pulling a bit of a thread here. So, and I'm not entirely sure. I don't pretend to be an expert in housing, but Councillor Green raised some concerns to Councillor Yates last year about the risk of right to buy to these types of projects, and received an excellent response from the officer that justified that there wasn't a risk from the council's perspective. What it did say, however, was that after year 15 there was a potential risk because the floor price, as I understand it, would no longer be as a key part of that. So when this report then said that the break-even point was at year 16, and that by then we'd already would be net nearly £500,000 in costs, it started to sort of churn something in my mind, working very slowly. So I accept that officer response to right to buy, and I questioned this at scrutiny last week, because in my mind, if the council is borrowing effectively £8 million to the cost of us to buy these, and there's a risk that the council could be financially out of pocket, when you look to that, that could actually be in the millions. And so I asked a question, and the officers made the very good point that it's very unlikely that you'd have that higher rate of right to buy. But the fact that we have so many projects coming at the same time means that the 15 or 16 year break-even point, they're all very similar, all going to come at the same point. And when I asked that overview and scrutiny, the officers assured me that they stress tested this. Councillor Whitehead, you mentioned that each project is assessed individually by finance. But what I don't understand is what that model is. And I questioned the officer about it, and it's not comparing projects on net present value. I don't believe the council uses any specific stress testing software or an external consultant, which this is something that might, outside of the council is something that I do. I find it highly unlikely that the council would be able to compare projects of this magnitude with the potential cost over a 50-year life cycle without bringing specialist expertise in. So this may be a question for to pick up separately, but I wondered whether anyone at this meeting could come back to me with what that methodology is of what they're being tested against, because if we as council are being reassured that these are being modelled and they're being looked at, I really would struggle to see how you do a model like that, even through software like Office 365 and using Power BI, or I know the council uses some of the Google documentation. I'd be surprised how you do that level of stress testing without specialist software or bringing in expertise.
I'm very happy to get finance to talk you through the process that we follow for each one. In terms of right to buy take-up, historically for Thanet it's generally pretty limited. I think in the last recorded year we had 4 overall. There are various projects coming up that look at how we can deliver housing in many different ways, because obviously the housing list is a very particular way of doing it, and so there are potential mitigations that could be looked at within those projects also. But yes, I have a huge amount of faith in finance, to be honest, because they're awesome. But yes, very happy to arrange for you to speak to them. I don't know if Mr. James wants to come in.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to say that I believe that the cost floor rule will vary from scheme to scheme as well. So although it may be year 15 on one, it could be a different year on another, and that modelling would be taken into account. Finance very robustly check all of the offers that we put forward and give us a ceiling, and then we try and negotiate underneath that ceiling for the offer so that we're not stretching the housing revenue account further, because obviously development is only one part of the work that goes on in the housing revenue account. But yeah, we do have officers that can calculate the cost floor rule internally as well. But as Helen says, outside of the meeting, perhaps we can provide you with some of that assurance that you're seeking on the way in which the finances are calculated.
Thank you. It's probably worth saying that the right to buy legislation could be amended at any point by any government, which could change the basis of the calculation as well. So I think there's always a degree of risk attached to it, or it could be scrapped entirely, which some of us would quite welcome. Members, any discussion? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And we move on to item 6, which is Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground Pavilion. Councillor Alban.
I'll say that again. Thank you, Chair. The Council received a petition on the 30th of June 2023 relating to the Council's management of the public open space Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground. On the 14th of December 2023, Cabinet approved the next steps to be undertaken by officers in response to the petition. This included approving the demolition of the existing pavilion and the purchase of a temporary porter-cabin style changing facility once demolition has occurred. On the 28th of March 2024, Council agreed that a capital budget of £370,000 be allocated to facilitate this, and this budget is now available for 24-25. The existing pavilion building at Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground is dilapidated and presents a health and safety risk. It is beyond economical repair and is currently fenced off to prevent unforced access to the perimeter of the building. This report sets out proposals for Cabinet approval to undertake the procurement and award of a contract to demolish the existing pavilion and erect a temporary changing facility. A REBA Stage 2 cost plan undertaken by consultants B&M has estimated the value of the contract at £360,000. B&M have also undertaken building and services surveys and produced a contract specification for competitive tendering based on the plans and designs they have also produced. Planning prior approval for the demolition of the existing pavilion was granted at the Planning Committee held on the 13th of December last year. A further application for planning permission to erect the temporary pavilion has been submitted in early May of this year. I therefore propose that the recommendations of item 1 and 2 of the report be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. Do you have a seconder? I think Councillor Keane might have got there first. I don't know. It's a close run thing. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, obviously broadly supportive of this. Spoken at numerous meetings about it and really welcome this. Just a minor comment, and I think one of the things I think we just need to improve with this project is communication. I made the same point overview and scrutiny to Mr. Marmo, but we started having the meetings with residents every other month, which I think is going to be really positive. But for example, for the last meeting, it's nearly 2 months and we haven't had the minutes from that meeting. It's such a small thing, but I have the residents message me pretty much every week complaining they haven't seen it. We've got our next meeting next week, and what should be a really, really positive time, I think, is going to be tinged by the fact that it's going to be negative because of, you know, communication. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can just generally improve, because I think people are really supportive, but it's small things like that that just really seem to rile people up.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Scobie. Yeah, should be out. There's no reason why it shouldn't be, those minutes. I will have a chat with Mr. Marmo later. He's probably saying, I'll sort that out. That's beyond me back. I think what's important for me to say is that, as you're aware, I have a good relationship with the residents who submitted the petition. I update them as soon as I know anything. I update them, and that will continue, and especially at the meetings that we have with them. And as you know, this is a priority for me. I want to get the whole of this thing done, and so we will continue on that line. Thank you, Chair.
I think Mr. Marmo wants to come in.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. So, first of all, an apology. When you brought this up at OSP, I went away to check which one of the officers was doing the minutes. I think it was a particular officer, and I was correct. And that officer is currently abroad on holiday on leave. so I can't get them. Otherwise, we would have got them out to you. So I do apologise. He's back from leave on Monday, and as soon as he's back from leave, I'll pick that up and try to get those minutes out straight away.
Thank you. Members, any discussion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 8 is TDC electricity and gas supply tender. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks authority for the Council to enter into new contracts for the supply of gas to 9 council sites and electricity to 12 sites for a 4-year period. Approval is also sought to move the 246 sites currently supplied with electricity under a fixed price contract to a new flexible contract for a 4-year period. The Council is required to ensure best value for money when procuring its contracts, and as such, the Council is required to re-procure its gas and electricity supply contracts before the renewal date of 1st of October 2024. The value of the estimated contracts for the 4 years for all sites is £8.3 million. The first place supplier in this framework uses a Renewable Energy Guarantee of Origin certificate known as REGOs to evidence the specific amount of electricity that's been generated from renewable sources. This means that they can ensure that the energy we are supplied with under this contract is backed by certificates from renewable generated sources, and as such, we can report our planned electricity consumption as 100% green. Further detail on this is shown in clause 8.5 of the report. I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Seconder, Councillor Alban. Any discussion, members? I think I have to say that's probably one of the most opaque council reports I've ever come across coming to Cabinet. But I have absolute confidence in the officers bringing it forward. And Councillor Yates, of course. Members, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 9 is the adoption of the Birchington Conservation Area Appraisal, which is me. So the conservation area in Birchington-on-Sea has been without an appraisal since its designation in 1976, and Birchington Parish Council approached Thanet District Council for an appraisal to be carried out. TDC appointed Alan Baxter Limited in 2023 to complete the appraisal at a cost to TDC and in collaboration with the Parish Council. Public consultation on the appraisal occurred for 6 weeks between March and April this year. The report refers to the responses shown at Annex 2. The full detail of the responses wasn't included in the report but has been circulated tonight, but there is a summary of the responses in the report. The appraisal helps to further the better understanding of heritage in Birchington and will assist as evidence in planning decisions within the conservation area. It will also assist in seeking further future funding opportunities if available, and provides recommendation for potential expansion of the conservation area in 2 locations. This will be the subject of further consultation if it comes forward. So the item seeks agreement on the appraisal and for it to be recommended to full council for adoption and publication by the 1st of August 2024. And I so move. I have a seconder, please. Councillor Alban. I will say it's produced rather a nice document about Birchington, which is a good read for anybody who's interested in the history of the area. And Councillor Pugh wishes to speak under 20.1.
Thank you, Chair. I will be quick. I wanted to thank officers for their time and work in pulling together this report, and the review of the conservation area, as I think it's widely accepted, was desperately needed. I just have a couple of questions. So I understand that there was a proposal put forward by the Parish Council to extend the boundaries of the conservation area. After discussing with officers, I understand that can be done, but it will need to be done under a separate consultation. So I completely understand and accept that. My other question is more to do with, particularly to do with the street services and the street scenes, particularly around the square in Birchington. And it was just something that was included in the report. I think it's page 33, talking about street services, where there's this horrible kind of mess outside the Powell Arms, where obviously works had to been done to kind of utilities, and they've taken up the slabs and then they've tarmacked it. And of course, we have that down Station Road where they put in new internet cables, and there's that kind of thin strip of tarmac. So I suppose my question is, and I appreciate enforcement officers may not necessarily be here to answer it tonight, but particularly when we have conservation areas like this and then utilities and stuff do these kind of work, are there any powers that we have to force them to put back what they originally did, or is it more that actually, because of central government allowing them to do those changes, that they're allowed to just kind of put the tarmac down, because particularly in the space outside the POW, okay, I admit, probably when this conservation area was first brought in, I think that space in front of the POW used to be a car park, so it's probably better looking now as it is now than it was back then. But this kind of match of kind of the nice stone slabs and then this kind of horrible tarmac, it just kind of looks terrible, really. So yeah, that was just my question, but very welcome that this has been done.
Thank you. I think that's a good question. I'll ask Mr Livingston if he can help.
Thank you, Leader. As you say, Councillor Pugh, it's very much, there's lots of permitted development with regards to utilities companies and what they can and can't do without needing planning permission. And there may be instances where they can, unfortunately, dig up the pavement and create issues where you've got areas of tarmac rather than slabs, etc. One of the things that the Conservation Area Appraisal does do is it identifies an opportunity around public realm improvements, and specifically the potential for future avenues of potentially funding in collaboration between the Parish Council and KCC Highways to look at some of the spaces, both in terms of wayfinding, street furniture, but it could also potentially look at services which may be under the control of KCC as adopted highway. But unfortunately, we are within the gift of central government in terms of legislation about things like utilities, telephone poles, etc., where we don't have that much planning control over them, to be honest.
Thank you. Members, any comments? That's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 10, which is the Budget Monitoring Report number 4 for 2023-24. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides Cabinet with a view of the 23-24 provisional year-end budget position for the General Fund Revenue and Capital, as well as the Housing Revenue Account. As indicated, these figures are provisional and therefore subject to possible change as part of the year-end accounts closure and audit. We are able to report a balanced position at the end of the year, but within this balanced position includes some significant over and unders. The key budget variances to note is £1.1 million overspend on the provision of temporary accommodation for homelessness. The Council is not alone in facing this financial pressure, as it is a national trend being experienced by councils up and down the country. The Council has taken some steps in order to reduce its overall temporary accommodation spend, including the successful development of Foy House in Margate, the approved acquisition of a further TA property, and opportunities to utilise other partner accommodation for TA placements. The Council is looking at all possible future opportunities to provide temporary accommodation to support vulnerable homeless and rough sleepers, whilst reducing its overall budget's impact. Nonetheless, temporary accommodation is expected to be the main financial pressure experienced by the Council in 2024 to 25, and will be a key consideration in the budget setting process for 2025 to 26. In addition, we have also experienced increased budget pressures in housing benefit, with a £425,000 overspend. Due to the scale and nature of the transactions accounting for housing benefit, it is not possible to isolate all individual factors that contribute to this overspend, but it is expected that cost of living crisis will have had an impact. Alongside temporary accommodation, work is ongoing in this area to explore alternative means to manage this budget pressure, whilst maintaining the level of support provided to some of the most vulnerable residents. Within our cleaning service, we recorded an overspend of almost £700,000. That was primarily due to higher than historical rates of sickness absence and a consequent reliance on agency staff across the entirety of the service, as well as a significant increase in vehicle repairs and maintenance. There have also been income shortfalls recorded in the property service and at the Port and Harbour. However, it is anticipated that these pressures will reduce in the current and forthcoming financial years. So, all these overspends have been able to be funded and the budget balanced by provisionally assuming a £1.5 million in additional business rates and £168,000 from council tax. We also have received an increase of investment income of £1 million and benefited from savings of £338,000 from the repayment of borrowing. Whilst these income items are welcome windfalls to balance this 2023-24 budget, they cannot be relied upon to continue to balance the current and future year budgets, and as such, as previously mentioned, work is underway to identify solutions to address the budget overspends, overspends we experienced in 23-24. Section 6 of this report explains where we have underspent against our capital programmes and the reasons for doing so, including a number of grant-back schemes that will be carried forward into the current financial year. This report also sets out some adjustments to our capital programme as detailed in section 6.3 and 6.4 and within Annex 1. In terms of our housing revenue account, I am pleased to report that there was a £1 million underspend, again mainly due to excess investment income and reduced borrowing charges. However, because the HRA was budgeted to run at £1.5 million deficit, this still represents an actual deficit of almost £500,000, and it is important that the Council continues with its rent policy to ensure the HRA is financially sustainable over the longer term. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Is there a seconder? Councillor Duckworth, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Scobie.
Thanks, Chair. I've got three sort of, two questions and a comment. Do you want me to do them in turn or just all as one?
I prefer you did them all as one.
No problem. There's a lot of worrying trends in that budget monitoring report, and I think we'd all, as councillors, be concerned about some of the risks and potential costs going to be impacting the council. I've heard mentioned informally people concerned about KCC's budget and the potential that they are under stress because of a number of factors. The big risk I guess we're all worrying about is a Section 114 notice, and the fact that if we even get close to one, you can potentially get drawn in. Has any planning or discussions taken place on this? And clearly we're comfortable with the budget that we're set and the position we're in, but we don't know what the future holds. Has any discussions taken place about this in the future? That was the first question. Secondly, shows that on the property income there's a shortfall of 445,000. Is there a figure for how much of our total value of assets are actually insured? What's the gap between the portfolio value and the property insurance? And is there a service level risk register for assets? So for example, on our major assets, if they are getting a property risk report, in that report there should be a maximum foreseeable loss as to what the impact would be, and I'd be interested to see, particularly for some of our major assets, how that actually tallies up with the insurance, because bearing in mind most local authorities are struggling to get insurance for their major assets because they don't have the money to invest in them, and they don't have the money to go through risk recommendations. I'm concerned that we're missing a risk on our risk register, which is under insurance. It doesn't mention it, I don't think, anywhere on our risk register, and I don't think as a councillor I was aware that that could be a risk, but the more I've sort of understood and looked into it, there could be assumptions we're being made that we're insured on major properties that we simply aren't, because the council can't get the insurance, it's too expensive, or we're unable to do the basic improvements needed in it to get it to a point where it could be insured. And the third sort of comment, Leader, is one that I've said to you as well, which is obviously we're under a lot of pressure on the budget, and clearly, you know, this is going to continue in future, although we hope that there may be changes. My strongly held view is organisations that are going through increased risk like we are should not be exacerbating that risk by putting budget pressure on areas like cybersecurity, risk management, insurance, health and safety. Actually, some of the best practices that if an organisation is going through increased risk is actually to increase investment in that, because the last thing you want is when budgets are tight and maybe finances are tight for risks to overlay, and then we're in a very difficult position. So those are my three comments, Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Scobie. I think that we've moved towards addressing your concerns about cyber security by setting up a Cabinet Advisory Group, which I think you're a member of, so there'll be an opportunity to discuss those issues there. I can't speak to the insurance issue, and I'm sure that officers will be better equipped to speak to that. I don't believe that we think that there's any risk of a 114 notice, but I'll allow Councillor Yates to come in on that.
Given that Section 114's responsibility as Section 151 officer, I think it's only fair to let them comment on that, but from my side, we're not close, and we've got healthy reserves, as mentioned in a lot of the reports, but I'd like to bring in Chris Blundell just on this point, and then if I can come back, Chris, I'll answer the other questions.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Yes, as Councillor Yates says, under the Local Government Act, the provisions of the Section 114 notice can only be issued by the Section 151 officer. It's something that is taken very seriously when that notice is issued, and is only issued when an authority is in really grave financial position. It's something that the authority is nowhere near issuing a Section 114 notice. Our reserves are relatively healthy, considered historical previous positions, and also in comparison to other comparable authorities. I take note of what you've said around Kent County Council, but I don't think it's for me really to make judgment in terms of where Kent are positioned. The one thing I would say around Section 114 notices at the moment is they've probably been almost replaced by what has now been considered exceptional financial support, which is a mechanism that the government are putting in place that allows authorities to borrow money to effectively plug gaps in their revenue budget, which is not allowed under normal circumstances. That was undertaken by a handful of authorities in this previous sort of local government finance settlement round. Again, that's not something that we are anywhere near sort of considering. If we were to go down those routes, we'd be having very detailed conversations with officials at the Department of Levelling Up. Other things that we would be considering before taking that action would also to be bringing in other organisations such as SIPFA to review the sort of financial management position. So in terms of Section 114 notices and also the requirement to need exceptional financial support, I can assure you that's not something the Council needs to be concerned about. However, nonetheless, there are some concerning financial trends that are set out in the budget monitor report, particularly around temporary accommodation, which is the one sort of service that I would say that really is demand-led and is much harder to manage the financial pressures in there. We don't have the same levers that we can pull in order to manage costs as we do some other areas. Nonetheless, there is work that's ongoing in those areas, and we're looking at ways that we can manage down costs, particularly in the temporary accommodation area. It sort of leads on to some of the questions you had earlier around the financial modelling that we're doing. So not just for acquisitions, but we're looking at our financial model for temporary accommodation, which I'm hopeful and optimistic will provide us with more tools and options for us to help manage down those budget pressures. I probably strayed a little bit more into some of the other questions, and sorry, I will hand back over to Councillor Yates now.
Thank you, Mr. Blunder. Yeah, so on to insurance and property, I'll just give a kind of high-level view from this side and then make a proposal as well. So insurance is typically there for when things go wrong, and what I'd say at the very high level is that I'm glad that under this administration with this new chief exec we are taking action to increase resources and our staffing so that there's less opportunity for things to go wrong because we have more resource. And for example, in the property team, we've increased the resources to ensure that the property we do have additional eyes looking after it, and we've got some reports coming up which will highlight kind of the priority buildings and properties. And going on to health and safety, there'll be a Star Chamber bid on health and safety to increase the resource there because we have noticed a few worrying trends almost on that. So these are all things that we are doing in order to reduce insurance risks. In general, though, I'd be happy to organise a meeting after this organise a meeting to run through the specific points you've raised. I don't think they're specifically budget monitoring, but I'm happy to organise that. And on to the kind of budget pressure the council is facing. Yeah, this is, as already mentioned and in the report, this is happening across local government. And what we're doing, because of the homelessness accommodation and that being one of the largest budget pressures, is we're using external resource to give us a list of all the various options that we could take to address the homelessness situation here. And I think yeah, so I can mention tonight that we've got SIPFA, who are the main industry body running that report, and they'll be providing us with a list of everything that we can do as our administration to address that main budget pressure we've got. And hopefully that answers most of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Yeah, I think we should be careful about banding around discussion about Section 114 notices, because I don't think that's the position we're in or anything like it. And if we actually look at the councils which have issued Section 114 notices, although all councils are under particular pressures, particularly housing authorities and social care authorities, those councils have had particular issues around their investment profile and historic pay settlement issues, I think in the case of Birmingham. So we are absolutely aware of the need to focus on the temporary accommodation bill, but at the same time we are not in control of how many people we need to provide temporary accommodation for. And to be honest with you, whilst it is a financial issue, it's also a human issue, and I'm concerned about the impacts on our residents, particularly when they're placed out of area. So it's one of our number one priorities to address. The other one is quite a strange one around housing benefit, and I think it's quite difficult for us as members to understand how we're paying out more in housing benefit than we're receiving from the government, because I don't think that's how the system should work. So perhaps there's a little bit more investigation to do into that, and also to discover how far that's the situation with other authorities, because it is quite a chunky number. As Councillor Scobie said, there are some quite chunky numbers in this report in terms of the budget, even though the overall position in the end is manageable. There are some quite big movements, but we are paying close attention to those. Any other discussion, members? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And the last item is number 11, which is appointment to executive outside bodies. The list is in the report. Cabinet's asked to agree the list of nominations to the executive-related outside bodies as shown as Annex 1 of the Cabinet report, to designate Councillor Yates as the Council's risk management champion. And I so move. Is there a seconder? Councillor Alban. Anybody want to discuss that? I'm delighted that we've managed to appoint Councillor Matterface as to the Quality Bus Partnership, because I know that's her particular enthusiasm, and she was very disappointed that she couldn't be on it last year. So we're pleased to appoint her to that. Okay, is that agreed, members? Agreed, thank you. That concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 6:42, and the live stream of the meeting will now end. Thank you very much for your attendance. Enjoy the rest of your evening, dependent possibly for some of us on the football result.